Greetings and welcome back to another wristwatch video and another wristwatch tutorial. And today we are talking dive watches, or more precisely how to use your bezel on your dive watch. But before we jump into that part, quick wristwatch check. What am I wearing today? Well, today I'm feeling a little bit dressy, so I'm wearing my dress watch, my Tissot Visit 8. And if you're interested, I already made a review of this watch. Link is in the description of the video. Also, the watch we're going to be using for our example, the St. Martin Vintage Diver. I also made a review of this watch. Again, a link is in the description for this watch as well if you're interested in the review. Now, first question that maybe comes to mind, what even is a bezel on a dive watch? It's essentially this outer ring going around the dial of the watch, and it is important that it can be rotated. Otherwise, it's not really a dive watch bezel. So as you can see, we can rotate it counterclockwise, not clockwise, only counterclockwise. And also another important thing is that it has to be specifically marked. So it should have a 60-minute scale going around the bezel, because there's also the GMT watch, and a lot of people which are not really in the know think that a GMT watch and a dive watch are the same thing. They are not. Even though they might look similar, they are really not. They have completely different purposes. Now, the main trait of a dive watch is, of course, that it has a rotatable bezel, and most dive watches today can only rotate the bezel counterclockwise. Now, the first dive watches, you could rotate the bezel both ways. However, this was a potential liability. Why? So this is not just an aesthetic choice, the purpose is safety. So dive watches back in the day, dive watches like this one, were used to track the dive time. And when they set a certain time, in case a diver would hit the bezel on a rock, coral, or whatever, it can only rotate in a way that shows that more time diving has elapsed instead of less. So the worst case scenario would be that the diver would spend less time underwater rather than more time diving. Because, for example, imagine if you want to dive for half an hour and you bump the bezel, it rotates in a way that it says you only dive for 10 minutes instead of 20. That could maybe possibly harm your life, put your life in danger or something like that. So again, it's not just an aesthetic choice that you can only rotate the bezel one way, it is a safety measure. Now, most people think that dive watches such as this one were used back in the day to show how much oxygen is left in the diver's tank, but no, the only purpose was to track the dive time. Now, another thing people don't understand, notice that I'm always using the past tense when talking about dive watches such as this one. This is because these kind of watches have not been used by professional divers for decades at this point. Divers today use a specialized device, a specialized diving computer which you can put on your wrist. At best, maybe you can find an old school professional diver that would use a watch like this one as a backup. So your Rolex Submariners, Omega, Seamasters, Longines, Hydro Conquests, these dive watches, even though they're called dive watches today, they are not really used by professional divers. In fact, there are a lot better things divers can put on their wrist instead of a watch like this one. This is just like legacy from a past stage where these watches were used as tools. Now, finally, one more thing I want to explain to you before we actually go into how dive watches were used and how we can use them today. These markings here. So as you can see, we have minute markings on this part of the bezel. Now, some bezels have minute markings all around the bezel, of course, but this one has it here. This also has a purpose to it. So their purpose is when a diver completes their dive, it's important for them to measure, well, it was important for them at least to measure how fast they are approaching the surface by each minute due to decompression. So in case they would reach the surface too fast, they could get decompression sickness. There is a specific table you can find where you can see, depending on how deep you go underwater, how many meters you should rise per minute in order to avoid decompression. But I don't have it here. I'm not a professional diver. You can Google it if you're interested in. But I just want to briefly point out that everything on this watch, everything on the original dive watches this dive watch is based on, had a purpose, had a point. The way the crown, or sorry, the bezel rotates, the markings on the bezel, everything had a purpose. Even though it looks very simple to us, very common sense today, a lot of thought went into it, and I just find it amazing and very cool how it was all calculated and measured to make a tool such as this one. So let's say we're in the 1950s, 1960s, and we want to go diving. How would we use this dive watch here? Essentially, we would line the triangle up with the minute hand to set our base time for diving. Now, let's say we want to dive for 35 minutes. What we would do is pay attention if the minute hand, or when the minute hand reaches the 35-minute mark on the diving bezel. So let's just unscrew the crown real quickly and pretend we are diving for 35 minutes. So time is elapsing, time is elapsing, time is elapsing, and oh, the minute hand hit the 35-minute marker on the bezel. This means that our diving is up and it's time to start slowly ascending. Now, what would you do then? You would again use your crown, or your bezel, sorry, align the triangle with the minute hand to check how many meters we are ascending per minute in order to avoid decompression sickness. So we would just look at this here and then slowly pay attention how fast we are ascending per minute until we finally reach the surface. Again, I don't know how many meters per minute we're allowed. You can Google this yourself. And that's it. That's how you would use a dive watch for diving back in the day, or today if you're feeling very adventurous. But again, I highly doubt many people use dive watches with this function in mind. You can use it in a more basic way, which is how I use it, which is how most people use dive watch today, just to use it as a basic timer, where again, you would just align your minute hand with the triangle to set the base time. Let's say, for example, I'm cooking something in the oven and it takes me 20 minutes for it to be done. I will just wait until the minute hand reaches the 20-minute marker on the bezel, and then I would turn off my oven. So essentially, divers back in the day used it to track the dive time, to track how many meters they're ascending per minute due to decompression purposes. Today, you can use the dive watch as a basic counter for cooking, jogging, or whatever you need to measure time for. And that's pretty much it for this video. Again, link is in the description for a review of the San Martin Vintage Diver as well as the Tissot Visit 8. If you like this video, of course, leave a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, leave a thumbs down, and maybe give me some suggestions on how I can improve my content. And subscribe if you want to see more wristwatch or fragrance related videos. And until next time, guys, have a great day and